Ah, night falls again in the abandoned meadow behind our towers. It's the perfect time to tell you a little story about a discovery I just made. I was over at my parents' house recently, and while we were looking through an old photo album, just reminiscing, we came across this photo right here.
This is me at age 12 in front of a Games Workshop in Philadelphia, a portent of the future, I might say.
At this location, I got my first ever Warhammer 40,000 miniature with my own money. And that one was something that I also happened to run across while over at my parents' house. It is right here.
What you're seeing right now is a Nekron Raider, one of the original models for the Necron line of Games Workshop's Warhammer 40,000 2nd Edition game. Now, originally, this was one of only a few models in the Necron line that you could actually collect for your army. Warriors and Scarabs made up most of the design, and for that design they were originally marketed as Chaos Androids. Yeah, these guys were originally designed to be nothing more or less than a continuation of Chaos. However, as time wore on, they developed their own unique lore and personality in the 3rd edition of Warhammer 40,000. It is in that edition that they developed into the undead zombie skeletons that we know and love today, praising metal gods from beyond the eldritch stars.
So not only is this a nostalgic miniature for me, but it's a nostalgic miniature for basically the entire game too. It comes from a time when Games Workshop was basically putting its little toe in the water for the setting of 40K to begin with. And that's something pretty marvelous to think about for me. I have a relic from an age of exploration, if you get the lore joke. So, what I wanted to do was kind of take a look back on it. I had never painted it. I don't know why. It would have been easy. Necrons are mostly silver, though if you talk to a Necron player today, most of them don't like to just paint their army all silver, so I'm kind of glad I waited for this. But now that I've had time to refine and develop my skills, I'd say it's about time that I go back and I try to paint this historic miniature and do it the justice it deserves. Now, what you're about to see isn't going to be like a tutorial. It isn't going to be a pro video by any stretch of the imagination. I am not a professional painter. I am not all that good, but I do enjoy what I do, and I do have some techniques that I'd like to share for the Joe Everyman among us who just wants to have a quick and easy paint job that also looks really good. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
So I'm going to begin with a basic black undercoat. This helps everything look really dark, and in addition to that black undercoat, I'm going to layer it with a bronze shade. Now, I know that I'm going to be layering up to silver later, but this bronze shade and the black undercoat work very well in conjunction with giving it that old, used look. I know that Necrons from this era of the game are supposed to look a bit newer and flashier. This is kind of before Warhammer 40,000 adopted its grim darkness in its appearance. But for me, I just adore taking old things and making them into something new. So this bronze undercoat is just the first step in doing that. After that, I take some dark silver and I just dry brush up. Dry brushing, of course, meaning taking most of the paint and taking it off the brush before you begin, and then just addressing the highlights with it. You see that this gives it a nice distressed metal look. Not too shiny, not too dark, and that bronze coat and that black are giving it that nice little recess there that makes it look like there's actual shadows cast by the model itself, even if it's not in the shadows.
Another technique people use is to try and, base it all silver and then give it a wash of purple ink, but I find that that look actually tends to run a lot more. It doesn't look very natural or naturally corroded. It just looks stained. And if that's what you're going for, fine, but I like my Necrons to look like they're just springing out of the ground after centuries of rust. So that's why I do this kind of undercoat.
So after I do that dry brush with the darker silver, you see how nice that looks? Yeah, the next layer up, it's not going to look that nice, because this is what we're dealing with. no matter how many times I shake up this little can here, when I open it up, you'll see that that's the oil, and the pigment is all stuck at the bottom. So I have to take my other brush, run it around in here like some sort of butter churn, and then collect it all on the palette before dry brushing.
Let me tell you, that's a hell of a way to package your paints right there to make sure that it's not exactly all blended. I don't know what it is. Maybe you guys have had better experiences with this color, but every time I've gotten this color, that little division between the oil and the pigment, it's always there. I never have good luck with that, so we just make do with what we have.
So what I'm doing here is once I have finished brushing up the body in that silver, notice I'm avoiding the gun, I still want that dark, is I'm trying to make the body less homogeneous by painting his medallion and decorations this blue. Now this base coat is the dark blue, and I can slosh that all over the place if I want, because in the end, what I'm going to do is line highlight it up. Yeah, using the tip of the top hair of this brush to pick out the edges in lighter blue as such. Then do it again, and then do it once more after that, while also addressing that emblem on the center of his chest.
I like to compare the feeling of line highlighting like this and doing the tiny details to being on the cusp of winning a video game. You know it's almost through. You know you're going to have something that looks really good in a second here, so you're anticipating it. You're sweating, your hands are shaking, your eyes are going back and forth. It's like you're on a sugar high for the ages. But you know you've got to keep your hands steady, because if you don't, you're going to have to do all of this over again.
So after I do all the line highlighting, I reach back in to do the lighting effects. So I'm highlighting up that little pale blue with a bit of white. It didn't work in the end, but I chose to just leave well enough alone and continue. The next thing on the docket was to do the red gems and red lenses, and let me tell you, for someone such as myself, there is nothing more synonymous with hellfire, brimstone, eternal torment, frustrating damnation, and Sisyphean tasks than trying to do these specific highlights with this specific style of paint with a brush that is frayed to all hell and a need for accuracy that basically would put me in the professional league if I had it. So instead, I'm just trying to lightly fade up the reds here so that they get lighter and lighter by increments each time. Now the next step is of course to address the green parts. You see that crystal inside his gun and this little hose on his back here once I get down to it? Yeah, those will need to glow later. Now in order for that glow to happen, I have to use this glowy green that really sticks out once you look at it. I mean, just look at that and make those eyes pop. And then you just gotta slather that into all the crevices where you just put that dark green to give yourself a general idea for where the glow is supposed to go. So I'm just going to keep following that dark green with this glowy green, but this is just another base coat. Now you think this is bad right now. Every time I take the brush to the model at this point, I have to make sure that the bristles are pressed flat together to create as thin of a profile as possible. And sometimes that's still not enough. And even after this, even after I use that thin profile brush to make these lines along the crystal inside the gun, I'm going to need to go even thinner for the next layer of highlighting.
I'm gonna keep it real with you guys. Like, this may look like I did this flawlessly or so the first or second time, but no, I think I had to retake this about 5 times because I just kept missing the mark with that green. I kept just splattering it all over the place. It looked terrible, and I had to clean it up and redo it over and over and over and over again.
So now that I've finally got it right, I mix yellow with the glowy green and water to get that light layer that really makes it faintly pop and glow. And then I take a bit of blue-gray and lightly highlight the hose on the back of the chassis. It's a nice flat color, but a brighter one than black to give it a little bit of differentiation from the rest of the metal chassis. Consider it my coup de grace on this whole thing. And my Necron goes from looking like this to this.
So now that it's complete, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on it. Did I do it the justice it deserves? Would you recommend that I add anything, subtract anything, have done anything differently, anything like that? Now I plan on doing a lot more of this, finding these historic miniatures and trying to give them a modern treatment. I have currently about 4 more in the works, 2 Necrons from 3rd edition, that no longer see too much of the light of day, outside players who were there from the start, and 2 Orcs miniatures, a Gretchen and an Orc Boy from 2nd edition as well, that I plan on taking the brush to soon. And I'd like to hear any suggestions you might have for those as well. I'm always learning. I'm a student of painting the same way I'm a student of music and a student of lore, so if you guys have anything that you'd like to throw at me, I'd be more than willing to listen. Till then, I'll catch you guys later on the next day that I have off in quarantine.